relationship. So this is tremendous from a ceremonial standpoint when you look at that line being drawn where the Catholic Church had been the only magical authority in that region of the world for so long, as a derivative of the Roman Empire, and now all of a sudden something was freed, something got broken loose, and Ave is specifically telling us that and specifically identifying that. The Luther distributed Bibles. I mean, before that, Christians were dependent on priests to explain to them what their religion was. They weren't reading Bibles. They weren't out there. They didn't exist. Or if they did exist, they were in a language they didn't understand. That's tremendously significant. What this also did, and what is said further about this, is that, and Crowley says that, and in a certain sense, the angels recognized that this new power that resulted from this was actually going to be a lot worse than the former one. And that's precisely what happened, because through the transliteration of the Bible, it got corrupted a great deal, and its meaning got lost quite a bit. And you see this later on when, well, you see this in Liber Al specifically, where it talks about sort of its method of religious studies in the 3rd chapter. You know, I peck out the eyes of Jesus as I hang upon the cross. You know, this passage, and Crowley explains in his commentaries on that means like the perspective of Christianity is wrong from the standpoint of self-sacrifice, for example. You can trace this into Liber 418, where it talks about the 4 great devils as essentially these are the corruptions of religion, the misunderstandings of religion, of the 4 great religions of the world, which he identifies as Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism. And you know, you can extrapolate from that just as a sort of central concept. And these are essentially like what you call like Churanzon, which is the central sort of challenge in the vision and the voice, and kind of like the cool part where everything gets all wacky and crazy, and is identified a couple of times as the Ordeal X, which is prefigured in the Book of the Law. We know this passage, the winners of the Ordeal X. Crowley in The Vision and the Voice references this specifically and says, you know, this is what this is talking about. It's this confrontation that leads to the crossing of the abyss. And I think it's very significant that when Crowley had his experience of crossing the abyss in this regard, it did amount to a confrontation. It was a fight of some kind. There's no peaceful way to drift through this, and I think we were talking before earlier about people. No, I was just actually thinking about it. People looking for inner peace are doing stuff like this because this is one of the things which doesn't really work out. I mean, I'm sure at the end of the system, inner peace, no problem, total calm, enlightenment. I'm sure you feel great, but to get there, there's not a lot of peace on the road. The angels increasingly terrorize Crowley throughout The Vision and the Voice, and he says in his footnotes, and you can think that he's being dramatic or maybe overemphasizing, but I don't think he's overemphasizing. If he's actually experiencing the things that he says that he experiences, it's kind of fucking terrifying. And he says specifically that there's personal things that go in there that he doesn't really want to discuss, or there's some omissions where he's just like, I can't really explain this part, or I can't really explain that part because I don't really want to talk about it, essentially. And I think that's highly significant as well. When we talk about crossing the abyss, we talk about the destruction of the personal ego, the personal self, everything that one attaches to. If you read Liber 156, it's an ugly book. It's nasty. And it basically, what the thrust of it, which is the book which is written for one who would cross the abyss, which is the fundamental initiatory experience described in The Vision and the Voice, and the rest of it is good, but I mean, it's essentially wrapping up. What it says in there essentially is anything, basically once you take this oath, anything you're attached to that you can't let go of in your mind, in yourself, in your heart, and completely let go of, well, when you take this oath, if you can't let go of it yourself, we will take it from you and destroy it in front of your face, basically. And that is the message there, and that's sort of what Crowley is experiencing here when he's going through this. We're going to evolve, because this is the second of 3 So we're going to evolve this into a discussion of the tarot because this was part of the main curriculum of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is where Crowley initially learned occultism, and this becomes an easy alphabet for the angels to communicate with him. But that also led into Crowley's creation of his own tarot deck, which, again, is the subject of the next lecture, but he evolved that out of this. And the reason the Vision of the Voice is so important is because there's concepts in the Book of the Law that Crowley had written about in commentary, had discussed in different papers. And this concept in his holy books that he had written about in commentaries and discussed in different papers that he didn't even feel that he understood until he had these experiences. And it's essentially an elucidation of everything that comes in between Crowley's writing the Book of the Law in 1904 and having this experience. So we're talking about a good 7 8 years of... No, it's not years. We're talking a few years, 4 years of writing and study and producing inspired material that later became clarified by the initiatory experience. And that's important too. It's the fact that he wrote these things before he understood them is important. And the fact that he had to go through this to understand what he had already written was important. I mean, Crowley says repeatedly that he didn't feel like he had deserved the grades that he had been told by spirits that he had attained to. So this was their way of bringing him up to speed, I guess, catching him up to what he had already done, pretty much. Yeah, let's see. The first two aethers, the ones that he had before the writing of the Book of the Law, kind of focus on, according to his annotations of them at least, sort of the interplay between Nuit and Hadi. In the 30th, and in the 29th, more of sort of the complaint of the Jesus Osiris figure who's being replaced by this next aeon. I think that it's a big deal because these are kind of the two main thrusts, and the reason that we know they're the two main thrusts is thrusts of